Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're going to decode how a massive global movement kicked off with literally the incredible journey of a single barefoot boy. We're exploring the Swaminarayan Sampradaya. Now, as you probably know, this is a highly influential, incredibly rich tradition of Hinduism that emerged in India back in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. It's a movement totally defined by profound devotion, incredibly strict moral codes, some truly radical social reforms, and of course, some of the most breathtaking modern architecture in the entire world.
5 million. It's kind of wild to think about, right? Today, there are over 5 million followers worldwide. When you look at those colossal, intricately carved stone Akshardham temples standing right in the middle of major global cities, it is almost impossible to wrap your head around the fact that this entire global powerhouse traces back to an astonishing 7-year barefoot trek through the wilderness. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll trace the teenage yogi's journey, break down the 5 elements of reality, look at the strict vows and radical reforms, navigate the succession and schisms, and finally, look at their massive global impact.
Section 1, the teenage yogi's journey. Let's get right into it.
Our story actually starts way back in the late 18th century. Imagine an 11-year-old orphan named Ganjiam. He literally walked away from his home in Uttar Pradesh and went straight into the dense, genuinely perilous wilderness of India. Taking the name Neelkanth Varni, this kid trekked barefoot across the freezing Himalayas, through thick forests, down to southern India, and eventually made his way to the state of Gujarat. Over 7 years, he completely mastered yoga and sought out a true guru. Finally, in 1800, he met a leader named Sahajanand Swami. Recognizing the young man's extraordinary divinity and natural leadership, Sahajanand Swami actually handed over his entire religious order to him. So at just 21 years old, he takes over this movement and becomes known as Lord Swaminarayan. Right after taking the reins, he gave his followers a powerful new mantra, Swaminarayan. It's basically a compound of 2 words. You have Swami, meaning master or lord, and Narayan, meaning the supreme God. By introducing this simple but profound mantra, he really began to institutionalize a movement that very quickly, attracted hundreds of thousands of followers who were just drawn to his charismatic presence and deep spiritual insight.
Section 2, 5 elements of reality.
To really understand why this movement exploded in popularity, we have to look at the why, his unique philosophy called Navya-Vishishtadvaita. Basically, it's a new, clarified form of non-dualism with qualifications. Swaminarayan expanded classical Hindu philosophy into these 5 eternal elements. Think of it as a precise roadmap for the soul to escape illusion and reach the supreme. You've got the Jiva, the eternal soul. Then Ishwar, the cosmic controllers or deities. Maya is the illusion or ignorance that traps the soul. But the final 2, that's where it gets truly fascinating. Akshar Brahman and Para Brahman.
But here's the crucial piece of the puzzle. Akshar Brahman. Swaminarayan taught that to break free from the illusions of the world, the soul actually has to attain the qualities of this incredibly pure divine element. This state is called becoming Brahmarup. Only when you reach that state is the soul pure enough to offer ultimate devotion to Para Brahman, the supreme God. Now, lock this specific idea in your mind, because this exact concept of Akshar Brahman becomes absolutely critical when we look at the institutional splits that happen later on.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, the strict vows. Let me ask you something. Imagine living in today's comfort-obsessed world and actively choosing to mix your meals with water just to completely destroy the taste. Crazy, right? Well, beyond abstract philosophy, Swaminarayan grounded his movement in a super rigorous daily code. This is an actual practice known as Naswati, and it's followed by the highest ascetics in the movement. They actively choose to view food purely as sustenance, completely stripping away any sensory pleasure. And this beautifully illustrates the Panchvartaman, or the 5 foundational vows, which basically set up clear lanes for different followers. On one side, you have householders living strictly pure vegetarian lives, no alcohol, no intoxicants, maintaining absolute marital loyalty. On the other side, the ascetics adopted some of the world's most intense, uncompromising disciplines. We're talking renouncing all wealth, maintaining pure celibacy, completely detaching from family ties, and practicing absolute humility, meaning they never retaliate even if they're insulted or physically harmed. No ego whatsoever.
Which brings us to Section 4, radical reforms. You see, Swaminarayan didn't just tell his followers to sit quietly and meditate. He used this intense discipline to actively tackle a deeply troubled 18th century Gujarat.
The social climate back then was dark. It was plagued by superstitions, cruel customs, and violent bandits. But Swaminarayan bravely pushed back against horrific practices like sati, where widows were forced onto funeral pyres, and female infanticide, where baby girls were drowned in milk. He also completely stopped the mass sacrifice of animals in religious yagnas, using scripture to prove that non-violence is the supreme duty. He totally ignored caste barriers, welcoming the marginalized to sit right alongside the upper castes. And honestly, perhaps most remarkably, his pacifist influence was so powerful that notorious local criminals literally dropped their weapons and transformed into peaceful, devoted followers. It's a real game changer.
Up next, Section 5, Succession and Schisms. So what happens when a profoundly charismatic leader passes away? Well, in 1830, Swaminarayan left behind a really complex dual legacy. First, he created this legal document called the Lake, which divided the administration of his temples into two dioceses, led by hereditary leaders from his own family called acharyas. But on the other hand, he also left behind the Vachanamrit, this massive collection of his theological discourses that heavily emphasize the importance of spiritual guides. As you can guess, having an administrative document over here and theological texts over there naturally led to divergent interpretations of what authentic successorship actually looked like for the next generations. Let's look at these parallel developments objectively. On one side, the original dioceses, the Vadtal and Ahmedabad Gadis, they strictly maintain the hereditary lineage of administrative acharyas that was laid out in the Lake. However, groups that emerged a bit later, like BOPs, which split off in 1907, lean heavily into the theological texts. They champion a spiritual lineage of living gurus retroactively traced right back to Swaminarayan's top ascetics. Their view is that a living, spiritually pure guru is an absolute requirement for liberation. And you also have other groups like the Gunatit Samaj and the Swaminarayan Gadi that follow their own variations of this spiritual lineage interpretation. Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand that these aren't right or wrong choices. Both of these paths, whether it's the administrative hereditary line or the spiritual living guru line, they deeply revere Swaminarayan as the supreme god. They literally only differ in the structure of the religious leadership they accept today. Ultimately, they are equally devoted ways of honoring the exact same supreme founder.
Section 6, Global Impact.
Regardless of the specific branch, these groups took that intense 19th century devotion and successfully scaled it for the modern era. Today, the Swaminarayan Sampradaya is an absolute global powerhouse. They've built these breathtaking, perfectly traditional stone temples in cities from New Delhi to New Jersey, London to Sydney, serving as vibrant hubs of Indian culture. But it goes way beyond the architecture. They run colossal humanitarian networks. I mean, they are always on the front lines of disaster relief, whether it's earthquakes, floods, or the COVID-19 pandemic. They operate massive educational networks, medical colleges, and lead highly effective worldwide anti-addiction drives to save families from substance abuse. 3,000. Think about that number for a second. This vast humanitarian infrastructure isn't just some modern PR invention. It's baked right into their history. During his actual lifetime, Swaminarayan ordained 3,000 swamis. He sent them out to travel, to collect alms during devastating famines, and just generally serve the afflicted. That early mandate of absolute selfless service, that's at the very DNA for the massive global disaster relief efforts the organization leads today.
Ultimately, it is just profoundly inspiring to step back and look at the whole picture here. A barefoot teenage orphan from a tiny village in Uttar Pradesh, a kid who wandered the Himalayas with absolutely nothing to his name, somehow authored a legacy of faith, pure living, and selfless service that is now quite literally etched in global stone, touching millions of lives across the entire world. As this extraordinary movement keeps expanding its boundaries, building more of these stunning temples, and reaching new communities, it really leaves us with a fascinating question to ponder. How will such ancient, unyielding discipline, vows that completely restrict diet, wealth, and ego, continue to adapt and shape the future of our incredibly fast-paced, highly modern society? It's a great thought to leave you with. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the world around you.